Hello everyone, and welcome to today's discussion with the Honorable Andre Ebanks, Minister for Financial Services, Commerce, Innovation, Investment, and Social Development. We're going to be discussing here today the National ID Program. Minister Ebanks, it is always a pleasure to have you with us to speak about these important subjects for the public.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Donna, and greetings to you and the listening public.
So we're talking about the National ID Program. Back in early November, Cabinet approved some legislation in relation to the National ID card system. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Cabinet approved at the beginning of November 2 bills. One is what's called the card bill, and one is the register bill. Mm-hmm. The card bill sets out the parameters on how to establish and get yourself a card, how the card is issued, and other functions around the card. That's the National ID card. Mm. A separate component to that and an accompanying piece of legislation is the register. So the register sets out the database for which will load the individuals who volunteer for the card, a basic set of their information to identify them. So to break it down in simple terms, as if you have a voter registration card, that's the document that you show that you can prove you're a voter. Right. But then the elections office has the register of all of the electors and keeps so that they can keep a track of who the cards have been issued to.
Okay, so I have forms of ID, passport, driver's license, voter's ID, etc. How will this particular card benefit me or just the average person?
Okay, so let's take a step back because this is not a new concept. I learned for myself, going on for the record, I think it was about a week or so ago by now, from the host of that program, Mr. Ord Connor. He did some research on the fly, on the show, because he said, I don't think this is new, I know it goes back. Okay. Did some research into the Hansards and saw that former MLA, Alfonso Wright, had brought a motion in 2007. Okay. And then that motion, Mr. Wright pointed out that national ID had come up as early as 1987.
Oh, wow.
And then that proposal, it was for a voluntary adoption. Fast forward to 2007, Mr. Wright was proposing in a motion a national ID that would be mandatory so that every person in the Cayman Islands who has the right to reside here would have a government-issued ID regardless of whether the functions that they have, whether they drive, whether they fly, whether they vote. You have a basic ID that says who you are so that you can easily transact government business. Okay. That also was not taken up. Fast forward now from 2007 to 2022, we are now deep into the digital age. So rather than just relying on a ID card that you physically show someone, it's taking that same concept but putting it in its digital form.
Right.
So a recent example of this is COVID. COVID showed us how much can be performed at home, how much work can be done from home, how much schooling can be done from home, how much business can be transacted from home. So taking that concept out to make the resident's life easier is to give you a tool that you can prove who you are digitally. So your example, to focus back on your question of the various forms of ID you have now. Number one, as a Caymanian, none of those that are in my wallet and money clip now prove I'm Caymanian. My driver's license doesn't prove I'm Caymanian. My passport doesn't prove I'm Caymanian. My voter ID doesn't necessarily prove I'm Caymanian. I'm holding on to one status letter like it is my Sunday school rosary for all these years. I don't want to lose that because that's really the only shred that I can show that I'm Caymanian. This ID for Caymanians will prove in one place, once you're verified as a Caymanian, that you just need to hold that document to show you are Caymanian. Okay. In addition to that, all residents should be able to have a document to say their immigration status, prove who they are, voluntarily if you want the tool. So that you picture going up to a counter, whether that's customs, whether it's a passport office, whether it is NEU. All these different departments now, to transact business with them, at least to initiate it, you have to bring the forms of ID that you have now to prove that you're you, because they don't know that you're you. That's taking all of those, that minimum set of data to prove that it's you, into one form that you can share at your option with each of the departments so that they can see, ah, that is Donna. So you no longer have to run to the counter with these various forms of ID to prove that you're you.
Right.
Makes your life easier. So think of the drive time to get there. What if you don't bring everything that you need? You get back to the back of the line. You either got to go back home or go to work or go get something notarized, then come back again. And then when you have to have done all that, you're now then starting the business that you originally wanted to do in the first place.
Right.
This gives the resident a form of ID that's government issued and recognized, allows your life to be simpler, and brings the country along in advances in the digital age. Our young people are overseas in schools in countries that this is happening. We need to move the country forward into the digital age. This provides a tool to do that.
Right, that's great. So what are some of the benefits that the different segments of our population can expect from having the card?
Sure. So say, for example, someone of advanced age, an older person, may not drive anymore, may not travel anymore overseas, may not have traveled overseas ever, may not vote. How does that person prove that they are them for various government services? So for individuals like myself who may be 20s and up and middle age who have these IDs and can travel around, you might say, well, I don't need it, I have this. But think of the person who is not in that position. So by making the card voluntary and then making an adjustment when we get to the committee stage of the bill to make the register voluntary, you can choose. So if you are very happy to say, I have these 5 IDs, government, I'm good. But then let's think about the person who would like to do it. So let's think about the older person that's triple proven themselves. Let's think about the Caymanians who want to have one ID that proves that they're Caymanian once and for all. Let's think about the scholarship student who is now applying for a government scholarship, has to prove they're Caymanian first. That's cut out of the way. Let's talk about the persons who have to go and renew certain documents, transact other services with government, NEU, for example, passport, for example, customs, for example. You're now providing those individuals with faster service, more secure service, and giving you back time. In addition to that, it also has the digital feature that you can sign documents electronically.
Right.
You then now have to print documents, verify them, put your signature, scan, email them, send them back. So if you take a step back from a bigger picture standpoint, let's think of Blockbuster and Netflix. Do you remember Blockbuster, West Shore? You'd have to go, hope that the DVD you want would be there. If it wasn't there, you gotta come back again, try to find out from the clerk who has it. Or Johnny Brown has it. You call him, make sure he can bring that back when you're going to bring that back so I can get that.
Right.
Then you go and get the DVD, you watch it. If you don't bring it back on time, they're going to hit you with a late fee.
Yes.
And then you have to drop it back off again and repeat the whole thing. Now back then, I don't want to make fun of it, that was cutting edge technology.
It was.
You got a little compact disc, it was lighter, you could skip forward, it wasn't a videotape. That was cutting edge.
Yeah.
Fast forward, you now have Netflix. That whole process I just described, you now do from your sofa. So the idea behind making it voluntary, and now to tie it to government services, is instead of you, as you would with your Blockbuster DVD, traipse to each of the government departments with these 6 documents in your hand, is to give you that sort of Netflix experience that you can do it at home on your own without going in and saving that time. Now, with Netflix here, if I go and tell you that Netflix is gone and you've got to go back to Blockbuster route, you'll be kicking and screaming. I've got to go drive to West Shore now, go back and pick up the DVD and go back home. we now have to move the country forward.
I agree. So how does the ID register relate to the ID card?
Okay, so the register, if you go back to my example of the voter registration database, the register is those individuals who have opted for the card. And that register for each of those individuals has a subset of data of your identity facts, which is basically your core details, your name, date of birth, immigration status, nationality, all of the information that the Department of Work and the immigration authorities have on file already. It's putting that subset of data into the database,
Right.
along with what's called related facts, which is some optional items that you can add, say your height, for example. And that then proves that you, Donna, are you. So you then walk in and say, I'd like a card. I believe this is going to make my life faster. Others may not in my family, but I'd like a card. You get the card, we verify that you are you, and then that information is in the database that matches your card and your ID code and your number. You then will be able to establish a profile in which only that subset of data that identifies you, so the documents that are in your wallet, now digitally with you, then opt which one of the government departments you'd like to see that data at your option. So their information isn't coming into the register. Your ID identification that you would be standing at the counter is going out to them at your choice. So I think one of the issues that we have found conceptually is individuals who may believe that the database itself will pull all of this data in and it would become a bank or a honeypot of information. It's actually the other way around. This is just your physical wallet or your bedside table of documents digitally that you're holding, and then deciding, I need to go to customs, I need to go to NEU, I need to go to passport office. And then they, at your choice, would see that information and say, okay, I'll continue on processing Donna for the service that she needs. And then the others that you do choose don't get to see what the other agency sees.
Now, because we're moving into the digital age and you know, at a somewhat rapid pace with the rest of the world, falling in line with the rest of the world, and it's it will be optional to have the ID card. Do you foresee this becoming mandatory at some point, or that more people will actually opt to get the national ID card because it will just be easier? It will make life easier for them, and the way of doing business would have changed. I
said this on a few programs, but I think it's worth repeating.
Yes.
So this ministry is not the National Surveillance Ministry.
Right.
It's not the National Security Ministry.
Yes.
This is the Innovation Ministry. What we're seeking to do is to provide the resident with an innovative, enabling tool that they can use at their option. So let's harken back to my Netflix example. To my mind, this should happen organically and voluntarily. So eventually, and I'll be the first to admit on camera, I didn't jump on Netflix right away. I hung on to Blockbuster for quite a bit because you do exchange a lot of information with Netflix in order to have that efficiency. But over time, you begin to see people just taking it up because it becomes the norm. It becomes efficient. You then see folks saying, Donna, how'd you get through that department in 2 days and I'm still waiting? Because I got one of these. Eventually people say, okay, and nothing's happened to you so far? No, the sky hasn't fallen. I'm still healthy, I'm still Donna. Okay, I will go and get it.
Right.
So give folks the freedom of choice to choose their enabling technology.
So that brings us to my next question, which is, does the information that one would provide as part of the National ID program, is it safe?
I see.
Is it secure?
Very good question. So the e-government team led by Ian Tibbetts is testing their database. They're making it strong based on international standards. But if Ian was sitting here, he would tell you and he would tell me as minister, no one can guarantee you that a database is absolutely foolproof in the digital age. There's numerous stories throughout very, very recent history of some of the largest companies that might be subject to cybersecurity. That is now a day of fact of life, including your phone sitting here, could be hacked. But are they building it as strong as they can to minimize that risk as much as possible? Yes. Importantly, they're also building it, and this is in the legislation, around the Data Protection Act that's on our statute books right now. So that is legislation that discusses personal data, who has it, and how they have to treat it. Those provisions have been enshrined into this legislation, so that those principles come through, and the handlers of the information have to observe that law, which is already on the statute books.
Okay. Another question, sidebar question. Suppose I'm someone who is living here, I'm on a work permit, I decide I want to get the national ID card. How will that affect me once I leave the country? What happens to that national ID identification for Cayman once I leave the country?
So there are provisions in the bill where it can be surrendered, or it can be struck off just like any other ID.
Okay, okay. So will this system change how government delivers its services and administrative processes?
That's a good question. So ideally, yes, because what you would want to see, and maybe this might be a good point to explain why currently in the bill, in the register bill, why it originally was shall right now as it's written. The idea is that since this is just a minimum set of data to identify folks that immigration authority has now, and even the general registry in certain cases has now, just have that into the database, and then that way the database is stocked and ready, and any individual who would like to have a card can be easily verified and done. Through the consultation process, we've established that there are individuals who don't want to be in the database at all for their own reasons. So, okay, so that's why we're going to take the legislation for the register bill and change shall to may in a couple of places. So that you, in your example, say you're a work permit holder, comes back and says, I'd like the card, so you get the card. We'll actually pull the data, verify you, and put you into the database. So that just sits there. You then, as that person, whether you're a Caymanian or a work permit holder or not, can then transact business with government easier, just like everybody else should be able to. But there are provisions to allow the exiting, which is your question, because it would no longer have any utility to you because you're not here.
Yeah, shouldn't.
Shouldn't.
Yeah. So will the private sector be able to be a part of this?
Sorry, before we get to the private sector, I think the second half of your last question was government departments.
Yes.
And them using
and administrative services, yeah.
So once that data is in and government departments begin to see, oh, okay, so now this person doesn't no longer have to come to the counter. The idea is that they would then work in unison with eGov to adjust their systems to be able to operate in this digital space. So to answer your questions, yes. However, there is a provision in the bill and there's a concern by those who don't want to be in the database at all. Well, then wait a second, then maybe I will get pulled into the database by default or indirectly. So if all the government agencies over time say, wow, this is fantastic, this tool is great, there's no need for anybody to come to the counter and say, well, we won't do business with you unless you have the card, then the person who's uncomfortable at this stage says, well, I could get boxed into this through practice rather than through legislation. To mitigate that concern, the section I think in the register bill, I think is clause 29, that talks about public authorities, is to put a provision in there to make it clear that the public authorities can withhold services simply because you don't have the card.
Right.
So to go back to the Netflix example, that might be fine in the private sector, but for public authorities that are administering public essential services, we'd still need them to administer to someone even if they're not operating in the digital space.
Okay, so final question. Will the private sector be able to use the card?
So there will be a capability to add private sector entities to the system and allow the voluntary person who says, I want the card, so if you want it, to then be able to share with those entities. So say, for example, a bank. It's to take the individual who doesn't have a bank account now for various reasons, predominantly because they can't prove who they are. And in line with our financial services, strict due diligence information to open a bank account, the banks aren't willing to be fined if they can't identify who you are and give you a bank account. So they have a whole subset of individuals in the population who are unbanked. In order to facilitate that, as just one example, this card would then give them the facility to prove who they are, despite there's been some rounds of consultations with the banks and other private sector entities, but then in particular on this point, because then you'd be able to prove who you are, agree that due diligence information, and then facilitate a bank account. Again, even in that example, it's the person deciding, the actual applicant, the holder of the card. Yes, I would like to transact with CNB. That's where I'd like my account to be. So I'll turn that field on, allow CNB to see that core data of me to facilitate opening a bank account.
Oh, okay. All right, that's awesome. So as we get ready to wrap up, where can persons go online to get more information about the National ID card?
Sure. So go to imagine.egov.ky. It's a website dedicated which has the bills, which tells you how you can provide feedback and gives you an overview of the legislation and its aims.
Okay. Now there are lots of organizations and people who have come together to make this all happen and to get the word out there. Who are some of those persons?
That's an important point. So going back at least 6 months, the ministry team went out on a very deliberate exercise where they had at least 24 focus groups, a sampling of individuals to now educate on this process and get a feel of what would be the tolerance level for certain provisions.
Right.
Fast forwarding from that, and that included, not sure if they want to be named, but let's just say various members of the community.
Right.
So that includes folks from the private sector, legal services, average person who is not in any of those specified fields, so folks in the BRAC, older persons, young persons, students, a cross-section of individuals to get a feel for, is this tool necessary and how can it help in your life and how it can be designed, and to sense check the design of it. After that, same process happened with caucus and cabinet. Most of the main media houses were given a briefing before the legislation was published, because I've found in my experience that sometimes the media is reading legislation after it's published and then having to decide or report on what they believe the intent and purpose is. Just as the same approach that we took with the financial assistance bill, let the media see it before it's published, hear from the ministry, not to dictate what they're going to report, but that they get an overview and then can decide, okay, I think that's what it's after, and then they can do their own independent reporting. So that occurred. The ministry team also, post-publication, briefed the leader, the opposition, the leader of the opposition, a few of the members of the opposition, so that they had sight of the ministry's intents. And then there's been public consultation from various groups, with various groups since publication. And out of that consultation, importantly, came an understanding that, okay, although certain provisions in the law were put there for good intentions, to allow the executive arm to make changes over time as the tool evolves. So, okay, we now take that there are individuals who say that might be too much too soon. Government, you have to earn my trust. This is a new system. This is my personal data. So what we attempted to do is not just the voluntary component, not just the clause to ensure that public authorities will allow physical or paper applications, but also, importantly, to peel back some of those cabinet provisions so that you have to go back to Parliament to make changes to add things.
Okay. All right, so any final words to persons out there who may be considering at this point, once the program is rolled out, may be considering getting their national ID card or not considering it?
I think that's a very good way to round up. Just as you said it there, considering whether to get it or not to get it. We'd like to give you a choice and amend the register bill to address freedom of choice. Probably, if I had to say it succinctly, it is, we are trying to find ways to move and advance the country forward and seek that shred of common ground to ease or try to satisfy the concerns as much as possible for those who have doubts, but then also let the tool move forward for the individuals who say they want and need it now, and say, Minister, please don't stop. Mm-hmm. Government takes quite a long time to do things sometimes. We have a real shot of providing me with a more efficient tool to ease my life.
Right.
And to facilitate things that I'm not able to do now. And I have to, I think as leaders have to listen to that, mm-hmm. but then also be mindful of the folks who point out this could be particularly dangerous. Okay. The idea of the committee stage amendments is to find that shred of common ground that keeps the country moving forward, mm-hmm. addressing concerns where it's possible, mm-hmm. but not getting stuck, because we do need to advance in the innovation and digital age.
Okay, Minister Ebanks, it's a pleasure having you with us to discuss the National ID program. As always, to you, the viewing public, we thank you as well for joining us.